I mean, let's face it took them 4 months to arrest her. You know, the time lag. If they had anything of substance that came about from the initial investigation, they would have arrested her immediately.
We just spoke with the grandfather of Sarah Grace Patrick. He's continuing to stand by the 17-year-old who's accused of killing her mom and stepdad inside their Georgia home in February. But he also shed some light on what he thinks detectives may have in their case against his granddaughter.
Okay, they claim that she did some internet searches for how to commit murder or something of that nature, and they claim they have that.
Why he is claiming that is not something that would tie his granddaughter to the murders of James and Kristin Brock. We're on the case presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. To this point, law enforcement in Carroll County, Georgia, have been pretty quiet when it comes to explaining what makes up the, quote, mountain of evidence they have against Sarah Grace Patrick. But we did learn some new details that we have not heard before in our interview with Sarah Grace's grandfather. Here's video of Sarah Grace Patrick in court yesterday for a bond hearing. This was the first time that we saw her since her arrest in July for allegedly shooting and killing her mom and stepdad in the middle of the night as they slept inside their house in Carrollton, Georgia on February 20th. The victims' names are James and Kristin Brock. In the wake of their deaths, Sarah Grace Patrick posted videos paying tribute to them on social media. She even reached out to TikTok creators, encouraging them to cover the case when it was unsolved. But then she was arrested, and law enforcement say they have a, quote, mountain of evidence against her. We did notice overnight that Patrick is now facing 8 charges in total, and that includes malice murder. That alleges that this shooting that she allegedly committed was premeditated. She's also facing 2 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. And on top of that, she's also facing 2 new counts of possession of a firearm or knife during commission of or attempt to commit certain felonies. Yesterday, a judge denied bond for Sarah Grace Patrick. State witnesses cited concerns about her potentially fleeing if she were to be let free on bond. Also, there are concerns that she could influence witnesses, specifically her 5-year-old half-sister, who allegedly found the Brocks shot dead in their bedroom. At the end of the hearing, the state said that Patrick's case would be presented to a grand jury, and hours later, she was indicted. Now, we still don't know a lot about the evidence that law enforcement has against Sarah Grace Patrick, but her grandfather did share some new information with us today. Her grandfather's name is Dennis Nolan. He lost his daughter, Kristin, in this shooting. It is important to remember that. Dennis was also the father-in-law of James Brock. This was a blended family that has certainly been divided since Sarah Grace Patrick's arrest. Dennis was in court for the bond hearing yesterday, and I spoke to him earlier today. What is your reaction to the new charges that Sarah Grace Patrick's now facing? I know she's facing those 2 counts of malice murder.
I haven't talked to the attorney about that because that came up. You know, the grand jury met after we left and came up with those charges. I think they're just a formality. It doesn't reflect anything else other than that. You know, it's like they're saying, you know, commission of a crime with a gun. The aggravated assault is that we questioned the DA about that after the hearing, and they said it's just a matter of law because if you hold a gun to someone, that's an assault. You know, you pull the trigger and it's murder. So you have 2 charges right there. And it's just, like I said, it's just more of a formality than anything else, and they're trying to come up with as many charges as possible. It's just a question, and I'm going to tell you this, if this thing goes to trial, it's going to be interesting because some things surfaced yesterday after the hearing. People are coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, that have information that I'm turning over to the sheriff's department. because, as you know, the prosecutors don't do any investigation. You have to leave that up to the sheriff's department. So, there were a lot of information acquired yesterday about James' background and some of the things going on in that house that I wasn't aware of just prior to the murder. And it didn't have a whole lot to do with Sarah Grace. Matter of fact, it had nothing to do with her.
In our interview, Dennis said that James and Kristin were recently involved in illegal drug activity up until the time of their deaths. The family of James Brock denies that. We did look into the criminal history of James and Kristin Brock.
People, though, they claim they have investigated all the possible suspects. And, prior to yesterday's hearing, they were saying that there was probably going to be additional arrests made. But after the hearing, they said they pretty much concluded all their investigation.
Now, Dennis and Sarah Grace's biological father, DJ, who is also standing by the teenager, have said they believe law enforcement did not do enough to see if someone else was involved in the murders of James and Kristin and whether their past had something to do with their murders. Now, we want to be forward and clear and tell you what we know about the past of James and Kristin Brock. And it's difficult because they're not here to talk about their pasts. But we did pull their records, and this is what those records show. We saw for James, there was a 2017 arrest related to drug possession, and he was given probation for that. He was also found guilty related to a 2018 arrest for possession of methamphetamine and marijuana, theft by receiving, and obstruction of a police officer. Kristin's record shows an arrest on the same day, April 29th, 2018, as James for meth possession and theft by receiving, which she was not prosecuted for. She was sentenced to drug programs for marijuana possession and possession of a drug object that was related to the 2018 arrest. We did find in 2022, James filed a temporary protective order against Kristin, accusing her of domestic abuse. That was then withdrawn later that year. We found in 2022, Kristin Brock was arrested. She was charged with first-degree criminal damage to property plus felony and misdemeanor cruelty to children charges. That case, according to online court records, was still active at the time of her death. Yesterday, during the bond hearing, James's sister, Kimberly Bowling, gave very emotional testimony, and she said that the Brocks had turned their lives around. They were born-again Christians, and we haven't found any criminal charges for the two of them since 2022. It's unclear who else detectives investigated related to the Brock's murders over the 4 months that this case was unsolved. I asked Dennis about why he thinks his granddaughter is innocent and what evidence prosecutors may have against Sarah Grace Patrick in this case. In this next part of our interview with Sarah Grace Patrick's grandfather, he walked us through some information about key pieces of evidence he's learned throughout this investigation. Police have not confirmed the digital and physical evidence he's about to tell us, and we have not confirmed it through police reports. But what he claims Sarah Grace Patrick allegedly Googled before the murders, we had not heard before. I know you went and spoke to the prosecutor after the bond hearing yesterday. Would you say after that, I mean, you're not expecting any more arrests from what they told you in the case?
No, they're not releasing any of the evidence that they have in the case. And they said, they were saying, well, we'll come out in the trial. But of course, we have discovery, we filed for discovery. And, they have technically between 30 and 90 days to turn that discovery over to the attorney, which means all the evidence that they have for the trial. They got to give her time to work through that evidence, and but they're holding tight on that, and that really bothers me because they were trying very hard to get Sarah to admit guilt, and they threw a whole bunch of evidence in her face just prior to the warrant. And we know what that was because DJ was present for that interrogation. And it wasn't anything, there was nothing there of substance. It was all you know, it was photographs of the scene, and they claim they have found gun residue on something that they found of Sarah's, and you know, but it wasn't conclusive. I mean, let's face it took them 4 months to arrest her. You know, the time lag. If they had anything of substance that came about from the initial investigation, they would have arrested her immediately. They waited because they were under pressure to do something, to come up with a suspect.
What piece of evidence, I mean, you talk about the gun residue, and I know they had, like they said, I remember like kind of the line that everybody keeps coming back to from that news conference was they had a, quote, mountain of evidence against Sarah Grace Patrick. And they have kept a lot tight to the vest, it seems, to anybody that they've spoken to. Is there any, like, from what you've seen, I mean, what makes up that like what they think they have? Like, what makes up the mountain of evidence?
Well, of course, I haven't seen it, so I don't know for sure. But what I've summarized from what people have told me is that their digital evidence was searches that Sarah had done on her phone having to do with murdering your parents. Okay, they claim that she did some internet searches for how to commit murder or something of that nature. But she didn't realize it was gunfire that woke her up, and I think you can understand that. You know, and she was a little bit dazed, and I guess she felt like she needed to call her boyfriend and see if he was awake at that hour. You know, which I don't find that unusual. So they're holding that against her. But they did gun residue tests against her on her immediately the next day, or the morning after the shooting, and they all came back negative. And I know they did her clothing, and it came back negative. So again, this 4-month lag of having her arrested and saying they have a mountain of evidence that's digital. It has to do with her internet searches, and as far as I know, that's pretty much it.
But they found like some kind of gun residue on like something she owns?
They said they found a glove, some kind of glove that had a little bit of gun residue on it, hidden in her closet. I don't know much about that, what type of glove or anything else. I mean, that's about it. Again, that was something that was found early on because like I said, they tore the house up, and they found that in their search of the house. And you would think that if that was enough of incriminating evidence, they would have arrested her at that time. Yeah, I think the timing of the arrest says a whole lot to what they have, or what they don't have. But I don't think they have anything that puts the gun in her hand. I don't know if I shared this with you, but they made the statement even in the initial press conference about no sign of forced entry. I know when I went to when they released the house to me, and I was trying to secure the house. And well, let me back up a little bit. Sarah did tell the investigators that when she went into the room initially, she said the room was ice cold, and this was, of course, in February. It was cold, and she realized it was cold because the back door was open. There was a back door that they had attached to their bedroom. Right off their bedroom was a little porch, and this door opened up into that porch. And Sarah told them that door, she found that door open. And they said there was no sign of forced entry. When I went to secure the house, the lock on that door was broken. And I didn't really think a whole lot of it at the time. And DJ took a picture of that back door and that lock the day that we had access to the house. And I have it right here. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but directly right here, right there, you see this mark right here? That's a crowbar mark that, there's clearly signs of forced entry. Now, the other thing that surprises me, when I look at this photograph, the police, of course, they should have dusted everything for prints. And I know from past experience, if they dust for prints, it leaves a little bit of a mess. They use a black dust. There was none of this on this door. So they didn't even dust this door for prints, which I think is the most obvious sign of forced entry I have ever seen. If you can see that. That mark.
Yeah,
right
I see
there.
that. That mark there on the door.
This lock right here was broken. Like someone took it and gave it maybe a wrench and twisted it, and because the insides were all twisted up inside. I had to replace that lock. That's a replacement lock that I put on there to secure the house. And like I said, I hadn't thought twice, but DJ saw this and took this picture of that door. So, I don't know the investigators how good a job they did.
We don't know a potential motive in this case. I did ask Dennis about something that prosecutors brought up multiple times at the bond hearing. There were questions about whether Sarah Grace Patrick went to an alternative high school. I know during the hearing, the prosecutors, a couple of times they asked some of the defense's witnesses about an alternative school that Sarah Grace Patrick went to. I know the first time we spoke, you didn't know of any mental health issues that she had, you told me. What is this alternative school that they were asking about?
Well, I know the last one she was in, I did know about, and the school expelled her. And when the school expels somebody here, they make them go to this alternative school to finish out their schooling. And I know she was going to that alternative school, and she was doing quite well, and she was taking it very seriously, and she graduated early from that. And but that's how that transpired. That she was expelled from school because of that drug incident. And you see, the thing is that James and Kristin were allowing her to smoke marijuana. I mean, I caught them in my house doing it. James and Kristin and Sarah together, which I was very upset about. But they did that on a regular basis, and I know they shared. One thing Sarah kept asking the day after the murder, well, did they find the marijuana? Did they find the marijuana? And I'm thinking, why? Why is she so interested in this thing? She says, well, there was a lot of marijuana laying on the table or something. And she felt like whoever committed the crime had grabbed that batch of marijuana that was there. And later on, I think it was Sarah that told me that they found it behind the nightstand or something. It had ended up in their bedroom.
We don't know if there were any drugs in the house the night of the murders. Dennis says that law enforcement told him that Sarah Grace is the only suspect who could have committed the murders, which he disagrees with. For the bond hearing yesterday, you had, I know, the pastor of the local church. He made a witness impact statement to some family friends. But you and DJ did not make statements. As being kind of the closest family members, it seems, to Sarah Grace, who were in her corner here. Why did you not make a witness impact statement?
Well, that was a character. They wanted character witnesses. I felt, along with even the attorney, felt the same way, that anything coming from an immediate family member is basically useless. I mean, of course we're going to give her a great character reference, and we're not going to say anything bad about Kara, and in that hearing, that the best thing we could do was have it come from outside the family would be more important than how the family feels about Sarah. But that was our thinking on that, and of course we could have gone up there and given a great character witness for her, but coming from her grandfather or from her father, it just seems like useless as far as if I was a judge looking at it.
Just lastly for me, Dennis, and I know that you have been in your granddaughter's corner, and no matter what people think, to have a family member in the position she is, and then for you as a family member trying to figure out what to do going forward, and you believe and have said that you believe that she's innocent, and there's still a lot of evidence to come out that apparently prosecutors say that they have. I mean, is there anything at this point that could change your mind when it comes to Sarah Grace's innocence heading into this potential trial in January?
Well, I mean, I'd like to see evidence that, sort of, as I've always used the expression, put the gun in her hand. I just don't think there is that evidence. I don't think there's enough evidence. Everything I see is circumstantial. I think that a decent attorney could work their way through this in trial, and when you have a jury of 12 people, all you got to do is reach one of them. And I think there's so much questionable things that I don't see anything that can't be disputed.
After deciding that Sarah Grace Patrick would not be granted bond yesterday, the judge set several dates in her case. The next time she is expected to be in court is September 22nd for an arraignment. The judge also set a potential trial date of January 5th. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.